Yes. Okay. So today's session is a bit different than the technical sessions we're used to. So, a few of the past sessions, we have taken a few lessons about Kubernetes in general, and then we've went ahead and talked about a little about networking in Kubernetes specifically, and then we talked about monitoring and observability in Kubernetes as well. It's not generalized. And today we're going to look at the Kubernetes perspective from business side. So, we as DevOps, this is I don't know if a lot of people know this, but there's a misconception that a lot of DevOps engineers just work with themselves or work with uh, small teams, while the actual fact, or based on my experience as a DevOps engineer, we actually have the most interactions throughout the day, because we as DevOps, we have to work with the business team, we have to work with the development team, the engineers, the QAs, with the UX UI designer. Maybe something is wrong with the deployment, it's not showing on the design. So in general, we have a lot of communication with other teams. واحنا كديفوبس لازم انه احنا نعرف كيف نتعامل مع هاي التيمز. And the most important one of the most important team, of course, are the business team, because they are the front end of the R&D, or they're the front end of the team. So even if a CEO or a CTO, we're going to talk about them, comes to you and asks, well, I have seen this Kubernetes trend. Can you tell me more about it? Of course, you're not going to go ahead and tell them the technical benefits of Kubernetes, because some people just basically understand business more than technical. So you have to explain it to them and the business perspective. So I have this question to you. I would like to hear your answers in the comment. Is when people hear about Kubernetes, what do they think it's associated with? So, if I talk to you about Kubernetes, would you think it's associated with business or technology? So, this is the first question I want you to answer, and this is going to be our gateway to this session today. So, is Kubernetes, or not just your opinion, when other people around you hear about Kubernetes, is it associated with business or is it associated with technology? For me, honestly, it's really hard to find people associating it with business. I find it technical. Yes, technology, exactly. I had the same perspective. We're going to talk about it more. So I had some business problems in regards of Kubernetes, and we're going to talk and discuss them in this session. So our index table of index today is why businesses adopt Kubernetes. So we're going to talk beyond engineering. We're going to talk about the value for decision makers, like CTO, Chief Technology Officer, or the CEO, or even the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer. We're going to talk about it even with engineers and operations. So we're going to see all of that perspective and different perspective into each one of these categories. And then we're going to talk a little bit about more about cost. So we need to understand the cost reality behind Kubernetes. Some say it's cheap, some say it's expensive. And then we're gonna talk more about operating models. We are gonna talk about cloud services like managed Kubernetes, and we're gonna talk about build or buying actual clusters of Kubernetes. And then we're gonna talk about risks, trade-offs, and common business mistakes. So what we actually know about Kubernetes may be wrong, and we need to actually change these ideas we're having, change the way we think of Kubernetes in a different perspective. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Kubernetes maturity. So, how do we start from a startup to an actual enterprise multi node, multi cluster Kubernetes? We're going to discuss a real world business use case. Yes. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is key takeaways and what's next. So, uh, basically, this session is meant to be a discussion. It's not meant to be technical in any point. So, it's only made for discussions. I'll be asking a few questions. I would love to hear your opinions. And we're going to also share the business part of Kubernetes. So, Why Kubernetes adopt sorry, why businesses adopt Kubernetes, not why Kubernetes adopt businesses. So uh people just go after trends sometimes, especially in businesses. Like recently we're seeing the AI trend, like they want to throw AI in everything, even though sometimes actually app just don't need AI, and it's a waste of resource, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. So Kubernetes adoption is driven less by technology trends and more by business pressure. That may be true, that may not be true. Honestly, I would guess, from my point of perspective, I have seen both sides. So I've seen business pressure and I have seen actual technology trends, so both. As organizations grow, they face increasing demand for faster time to market, higher service reliability, and ability to scale without uh, linear increases in cost or operational effort, of course. Well, sometimes, especially when you deploy a lot, so keep that in mind, deploy a lot, you need a faster way than just like releasing or something. You need some type of a tool that will help you release faster to market, decrease the time, decrease the resources, and you just deploy frequently. So, Kubernetes provides a standardized platform that reuses dependency on individual teams or vendors, enabling businesses to deploy, scale, or recover application consistently across environments. So, I know I have said that this is not a technical session, but of course we're going to incorporate a little bit of technical understanding of Kubernetes. So sometimes it's really hard to implement replica sets on-prem or locally without actually having a tool to do that. It's really hard to do deployments or ingresses. It's not that hard. It's just more complex. It needs more time. It needs more resources. It needs a dependency on certain type of people who understand these actual concepts. But Kubernetes makes it very easy for you to actually use Kubernetes concept in your advantage if the team actually understands these concepts. So don't keep no, I meant keep in mind that there is a very huge learning curve for the business or for the organization in regards of Kubernetes. So it's not a hard topic to learn. It's not. It's just it needs a learning curve. It needs effort. It needs time and it needs resources for your team to actually understand Kubernetes. So you need to take this in regards. Beyond infrastructure automation, it becomes a strategic enabler for agility, resilience, and long term operational efficiency, allowing companies to focus on delivering value to customers rather than managing servers. So, we understood multiple advantages of Kubernetes, like the rollback and blue deployments, and we understand how fast it is to actually just spin up pods, remove pods using replica sets or deployments in general. And it has the self-healing ability, and this is one of the huge advantages. So once a pod fails or it's not utilizing its resources correctly, Kubernetes would just drop this pod and create another one in a matter of seconds. So it's very minimal downtime. It's what businesses need to keep their SLOs or SLAs in place. And this is what you need to understand from business perspective. So what businesses say versus what Kubernetes actually fixes. So sometimes before Kubernetes, what the slides mean, before Kubernetes, deployments, releases would take so much long. Outages are too risky because some virtual machines may drop and we don't have some type of scaling on it. And it would be a very hassle to scale based on metrics. And we're too dependent on specific engineers, especially those engineers that only maintain the infrastructure. They don't maintain the actual app. They maintain these servers that they want like not to have any kind of downtime. And cloud costs keep surprising us, of course. So these are previously before Kubernetes. We're gonna talk more about managed Kubernetes prices. Like one EKS cluster costs around $75. It's so much less than having a virtual machine and I need you to keep in mind that you're adding 75% plus the actual EC2 nodes that you're using. So if an EKS cluster is 75% because they manage the control plane, you need to keep in mind if your cluster is using EC2 instances, if you chose that option, of course, there's Fargate, you're going to pay for those EC2 instances. So it's basically the actual cluster you're gonna pay for plus the resources. And now we're gonna have to think, what do you mean by cloud costs are gonna keep surprising us? We have both now. We don't just have servers. Well, Kubernetes helps with scaling, it helps with auto healing, and maybe scaling in previous models before Kubernetes you would have to pay double the price. Like you would use 3 4 servers instead of just having one cluster on one EC2 instance. So there would be dependency or balancing discrepancies, and it would be different using a cluster than actually using servers. So on a small scale بحجم جدا صغير السعر ما حيفرق. So the price is not going to be different on a very small scale, but on a very huge scale or a medium scale, it's going to actually have its differences with a small scale application. And we're going to talk about this. So uh, I have a question. I have a very good question, actually. At what point does a simple infrastructure stop being enough? And this is my first question. Second question. At what point does simple infrastructure stop being enough? I want, if you can answer on the chat, I would love that. I want to answer that question because I do have my opinions on that, and I don't want to share it. I want to see your opinions before I talk about it. And then the third question is Kubernetes something you choose or something you're pushed into? So the first question, when does a simple infrastructure is not enough? You need more. And the second question is, when do you choose Kubernetes or you're pushed into it? Yes. Okay. So let's go on the next slide. And what businesses says versus what Kubernetes actually fixed. So what Kubernetes actually delivers is faster, repeatable deployments. As we said, if you deploy multiple times per day to the market, you need more releases, you need more deployments. You're going to use Kubernetes, of course. Built-in resilience and self-healing. As I said, it's one of the biggest advantages of Kubernetes is to have self-healing and rollback. On-demand scaling without manual effort. Of course, replica set has made it very easy for us to scale up more or less of pods. And then standardized operations across teams. Of course, Kubernetes would standardize all procedures between the DevOps teams and the dev team, and better control over resource usage. And this is what I was talking about when we talked about cost earlier, is you know how to balance resources, you know how you actually have better utilization of your resources when you're using Kubernetes. So you're not just using 5 servers and you're paying for it. Kubernetes just split these into one server and would make it very efficient for you to do that. So let's read some of the chat. Latency increase, error rate increases, throughput and saturation. That's very good, Wasim. Yes, Mayo, it will stop the application to optimize cost with troubleshooting. Also, yes. When high memory and CPU utilization far from node capabilities, that's also true. Also, keep in mind when the users increase. So when we have a very high demand of users, that comes with latency, that comes with you need less latency, you need better performance. So when your application actually becomes famous, let's say, and there is more user demand to it, you need to start actually looking into other options than actually manually provisioning your own servers. And that there's throughput will user demand increase. Yes, that's actually correct. And I would guess sometimes you can choose Kubernetes and sometimes you can be pushed into Kubernetes based on the business case. So if you have the resources as a business, if you have the resources, if you have the time to actually enhance your application, if it needs to. If it needs to, you can choose Kubernetes. But if your application is growing and there is a lot of errors, as the chat said, as Wasim and all of you guys said, you need actually to be pushed into Kubernetes or Docker Swarm or whatever container orchestration tools, because at one point you're gonna stop being able to handle thousands of containers or hundreds of containers. You keep restarting that, you keep restarting that. It's just, it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of maintaining from the DevOps engineer. And from my point of perspective, a DevOps engineer can utilize his time into better optimizing the infrastructure than just trying to maintain container health manually inside of EC2 instances. So, we're gonna talk about decision makers now, and we're gonna have another question at the end of index 2. So Kubernetes value for decision makers. Of course, in a company hierarchy, we have multiple decision makers. We have, first of all, the CEO, and then we have the CTO, and then we have the CFO, and then we have some engineers, managers, or engineering managers, and all of that. So first things, let's look at the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, business outcomes. So if a CEO comes to you and asks you what is the benefit of Kubernetes, you would gonna try and explain that faster product launches to market. So it's easier if you keep deploying, if you keep adding patches, if you keep adding fixes. Uh, yes, exactly, Wasim. Exactly. Yes, 100%. So you need faster product launch to market. You have a lot of patches. You need a lot of releases. Higher uptime gives brand trust. So if you have very nice CLAs or CLOs, actually having the application uptime like most of the time, I'm not gonna say most of the time, it should be all the time. It's gonna give customers or client the trust you need in your product. So Kubernetes help you do that by self-healing, of course. Ability to scale without chaos, so you can add more resources or less resources depending on the user demand, of course, and this is easier to be handled via Kubernetes. So the next one is the CFO or Chief Financial Officer. Of course, if we're talking about finance, we're going to talk about cost and predictability. Of course, I had this multiple problems, budget factor for deploy with Kubernetes. Exactly, I had this problem. To be more specific, is our AWS bill was sometimes going through the roof, and then the next month it just goes down normally. So yes, cost in cloud is a crazy topic to talk about. It's also one of the things that would make you mad as a DevOps engineer, and it's because it's purely out of mistake. So sometimes just cost would go up and down based on mistakes. Of course, there's best practices to prevent doing that, like budgeting or AWS budget that would give you alerts if it goes up a certain threshold. Like you put $100, $1,000. If it goes up beyond that, please send me an email. I don't want to like just be shocked by the end of the month of the bill is 10K. And we have cost analysis and cost control on all of the AWS, not sorry, all of the cloud providers, not just AWS. So for the CFO, he needs to understand that he's gonna have better resource utilization. He's gonna have his servers or his computational resources better utilized. Even not just in computation here, we're talking even in engineering. So you're gonna have the DevOps engineer having less to maintain something manual and better to enhance your current infrastructure, to work on projects, to work on POCs, MVPs that would actually help your business grow and succeed. So also reduced over provisioning, of course, that's what I said during our talk, and visibility into where the money is spent. Yes, exactly. So Kubernetes would actually help you in these points, especially if you're a CFO. So yes, from a company perspective, they want to save costs, but they want to add more features with it. So find other resources for less critical deployment. Exactly. Yes, of course. As we said, and thank you, Malik, for sharing this. It's based on the business need. It's not always Kubernetes is the right choice for you. Sometimes it's just leave it to basically maintain that. just maintain it manually. CTO, which is the Chief Technology Officer, and the whole idea behind KTS save money by better utilizing computing power effectively. In the old days, we used to have an instance for each workload. Not now we have KTS, and we have plenty of workloads running on the same computing nodes. Exactly, that's 100% right. Um, Yes, but it's preferably to separate clusters via environment. So if you have production environment, have production cluster. If you have staging, QA, if you have dev environment, preferably to separate each one via cluster. Of course, if the workloads and the business case abides you to. Of course, you need to separate. Of course, and even Kubernetes has namespaces to separate these type of ideas alone. So, the CTO or Chief Technology Officers, the head of R&D and technology department, having Kubernetes is having a platform standardized. So you would actually understand that in every release or in every product you're going to have the same thing, you're going to have the same result. Of course, if it's not a code problem, sometimes of course it can be a deployment problem or a DevOps problem, but sometimes if you're just using a standardized platform like Kubernetes, it's very less to have um, problems via deployments. Cloud and vendor flexibility, of course now every cloud vendor has Kubernetes clusters in it, like Oracle has OK, or Oracle Cloud Engine. Google or GCP has JKE, which is Google Cloud Engine. Also, Azure has AKS, which is Azure Kubernetes Services, and AWS have EKS, which is Elastic Kubernetes Services. So every cloud vendor has their own uh, Kubernetes services on their cloud. When KSS first launched, they used to promote it through the concept of data center as a computer. Interesting. That's really nice. So, engineering and ops executions, of course, as we said, less manual work. Yes, of course, while maintaining things. It's such a hassle. And faster recovery from failures. Yes, Kubernetes help you do that. It would actually give you logs, as we talked about in the previous session, how Kubernetes talk to you without having an actual tool. A consistent environment everywhere. We also talked about that in the CTO. And then the last line that we're going to talk about is Kubernetes succeeds when every role gets value, not just engineering. So this perspective that Kubernetes only helps DevOps is not true. It helps, as we saw in that section, it helps multiple people, from even the CEO to ops to engineering to CTO to CFO. It helps a lot of people across the team, across the organization, by only just utilizing resources using Kubernetes. And we have a question: who do you think benefits most from Kubernetes? Are they engineers or businesses? So, who benefits from Kubernetes after this session? I would say both equally, because maybe more on the technology side, because it's really a hassle. I'm talking on a personal experience. It's really a hassle maintaining containers manually. It's not that good of experience, to be honest. So I would guess it benefits both, but most it's more to the technology side. Okay, I would love to hear your answers, by the way, on in the chat section. So, cost reality, work money is win or lost. 40 to 60, exactly. 40 the business side and 60 the technology side. I'd actually agree on that. So, common myths we're gonna talk about. I don't know if this is like, yes, guys, can you see the whole screen? Yeah, I think you can. So, let's go. Yes, so let's go on the next session. Next index, where money is won or lost. So, common myths: is Kubernetes too expensive? Yes, sometimes Kubernetes is more expensive, especially if you have a very small scale application. Yes, because having a small application, as we said, is just easier to handle manually. It's not better to use like Kubernetes because you're gonna pay for Kubernetes plus resources, and then cost reality of that is idle resources actually silently burn budget. So uh, Kubernetes utilize computational power, memory, and CPU to distribute the workload, while just having it manually is gonna also burn budget. So, as people said in the chat, as I was saying the whole session, that using one node or one cluster in EKS can help you instead of deploying on like 30 EC2 instance, maybe you can use 4 or 5 and just have the same results. So if you're gonna actually have to calculate it, for example, $500 cost per one EC2 instance times 30, that's a lot. But if you have to pay 5 per 500 plus the 75 we talked about, that's very much less than just manually doing that. And then we have managed Kubernetes solves all cost issues. That's also not true. uh, yes, managed Kubernetes services on cloud vendors would help you a lot in a lot of areas and a lot of places. But if you have poor auto scaling decisions, it will cost you more than just manually provisioning that, because you never know when a traffic spike will happen. And if you just keep adding nodes, you keep adding instances, your cloud bill is gonna go through the roof without you having any idea of that. So you need to actually have very good auto scaling decisions. Kubernetes will not help you with that. You're the one who needs to take decision. Is it Does the application need one node as a minimum or desired, and how many would take for a maximum, like 10 pods? So you need to be able to understand these points of perspective, um, and you need to be able to make these type of decisions. Also, more nodes, better performance. That's not true at all. So, more nodes does not mean better performance. Uh, Based on the resource utilization, it may need nodes to go up or down, scale up or down. That does not mean that if you scale down because there's no traffic, there's no usage on the application, it will affect the performance in any kind of way. So, observability is not an option as well. You need to keep I'm sorry, yeah. You need to keep it's a cost control tool as well. So how what do we mean by that? We can have like a Prometheus agent scraping the data out of the cluster, and this data would actually makes us understand, are we overutilizing our resources or underutilizing our resources? Is there like our CPU utilization is always between 70 to 80%, which is a lot, it's exhausting the resources, or is it always under 20%, 25%, so we can maybe lower the sizing of the EC2 instance or lower the nodes or lower the pods we're using? So observability is also a cost control tool. It will help you in understanding how many exact nodes you need for a good performance, a great performance, without underutilizing those resources and provisioning them. Containers automatically save money. Of course, no, that's not true. Based again on the business scale, we can talk about that, but containers not always a good solution to do that. And over provisioning is the number one cost killer. Of course, as we said, more nodes does not mean more performance. It only means more cost at some point. um, we need to, we of course we have a question in the chat. We need to calculate how many users requests that need resources so Kubernetes can scale. Well, yes, but not manually actually taking these not manually taking these calculations. It's based on a very not long, it's over a period of time where you can see like over months, 3 months, you can see the spikes in traffic. You would understand maybe on weekends you have less traffic, on weekdays you have more traffic, and certain days you have even more traffic. So it's like a study that comes across a period of time, and you would understand that by having to provision, having a monitoring tool on the Kubernetes cluster, scraping these metrics 24/7 on a period of the study you want to make it on. So we have operating models built by or manage. I'm gonna go by these very fast. So first thing we're gonna talk about is self-managed, of course, or you build it yourself. This idea or this perspective of self-managed is basically you install everything and you take care of everything. So you would install the Kubernetes, you would install the control plane, you would install manually install them, and you would actually be able to handle everything you want. It's better for some ideas, uh, but it's not always the better idea. Only if you want really full control over your resources, you want certain type of customization that Kubernetes does not provide. So you need to actually download everything, and you have to like go into configuration and edit it, and requires strong in-house expertise. Of course, I was actually having this chat today about managed Kubernetes, and I said that learning on cloud vendor Kubernetes services is not the way, because cloud vendors manages the control plane, and it would not give you a full understanding of Kubernetes. Of course, it's a good start, but I do not recommend it, as I actually want you to see the control plane and the worker nodes working hand in hand together, because this would make you understand the whole Kubernetes aspect, not just how worker nodes work. So uh, you would imagine having to manage control node and worker node, and having to go inside their configuration file and edit them. It would need a lot of experience, it would need a lot of knowledge. You would need very specialized people in Kubernetes that actually understand this, and there is a lot of operational overhead, um, because as a dev team you're gonna be maintaining the cluster, be maintaining the cluster yourself. But this does not bring any value to business. I mean, seeing things running hand in hand. Yes, I'm not saying that seeing control plane is actually gonna benefit the company. It's not gonna benefit the company. I'm saying as a personal project was seen for you as a person. If you want to learn Kubernetes, you have to actually see how control plane and worker nodes work together. But if you're actually in production and you have multi environments, of course you're gonna go with the managed option. It's easier. It's Every one of them has its benefits. So if you want, as I said, in the self managed, if you want your own personal customization that is not provided by Kubernetes, you have to go with the self managed one. And the next one is by platform distributions. Of course, there is a lot of distributions of Kubernetes. Uh, if you want, like, you can install like the one we did locally. I would guess this is a very good one by a platform or distribution. The one we did locally was using Minikube, or K8s or K3s, and we used Colema. This is a platform. So Minikube is a platform. It eases the managing of cluster. It would do some type of configuration. It will launch the cluster on its own, and we don't have to interfere with that, like the one we did in the labs. Okay, and then we have partial vendor dependency, of course. If we're using Minikube, we're going to be stuck with Minikube. If we're using K3s, we're going to be stuck with K3s. It's best for growing teams or hybrid setups. So also you can take that in consideration. Also, it's cheaper than managed Kubernetes. Maybe it's cheaper, maybe it's not. I would guess you would need also computational resources to manage Kubernetes. So it all comes to like a sense where each business case has its own idea. And the last thing we have is managed Kubernetes. And this is the one we talked about, the one provided by vendors. This would benefit multi-environment companies or companies that have multiple products because it has faster time to value. You don't have to manage everything, so there's reduced operational overhead or burden. And less low level control, you would only focus on the business logic, on the product you need to launch uh, to market. So it's best for startups, um, I'm sorry, lean team and product focused organization. Yes. And Kubernetes success, it actually depends on less on the tool and more who owns responsibility. So it's basically Kubernetes success is based on the team. It's based from the CEO to the CFO to the CTO to the engineer and ops, as we said. We have the number five, risk trade offs, common business mistakes, and why Kubernetes fails. And it's rarely technical. And this is what we were talking about. Sometimes Kubernetes fail in an organization and it's not a technical thing. And I have a question for you guys. Have you ever seen Kubernetes adopted and then just basically ignored? I have, not gonna lie. I have seen me personally, I was trying to adopt Kubernetes, and then the perspective of using Kubernetes was a hassle because there is a lot of cost, a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of learning curve. So there's a learning curve for the team to learn Kubernetes. So I have seen businesses trying to adopt Kubernetes and then they just throw it away. So treating Kubernetes as just infrastructure, that's a very common mistake. Sometimes people don't understand ownership, unclear accountabilities, and slow decisions. So it's not just infrastructure, as we said. It's also has the team in some way or another. It has the team, not just the infrastructure. Adopting Kubernetes too early, so that's also a common mistake that some businesses use. Complexity without real scale benefits. As we said, if you have a very small scale application, well, using Kubernetes may not be your best option here because um, it's not a very good option to just have this learning curve, to have this cost, and then and this complexity while you can just manually provision the application, or maybe using ECS on AWS. So if your team already has ECS knowledge, it just does not make sense to go ahead and switch platforms unless your team is actually ready to handle that. No cost or usage visibility, budget overruns, financial mistrust, and surprise bills, of course. As we said, you need to have some type of decisions over autoscaling, understand autoscaling, and how resources are being utilized. So let's go for the next slide. Underestimating skills and culture. Of course, Kubernetes is a culture, actually. It's a skill that not everyone would actually can understand. It can cause burnout, it can cause hero engineers and fragile operations. No vendor lock use with Kubernetes. I would guess no, you would if it, based on the model you're using. So if you're using a managed model, of course they're gonna be vendor. It's not from Kubernetes. It's gonna be vendor locked from the cloud vendors. But if you're using not a self-managed one, i- you're also gonna have, like, if you're using Minikube, you're gonna have Minikube. It's partial dependency, so it's not that big of a deal. And then if you built it from scratch, you're not gonna have any kind of vendor lock in any kind of way, of course, because you're managing everything. So everything comes with a price. If you don't want any vendor lock, you're gonna have to provision everything, and this is gonna cost you more overhead, operational overhead. Copying pasting big technical architecture, of course, not every architecture, not every app works the same, or there's no standardized way to have all application working in the same way. So it's called over engineering, and there is no return of investment, and unused tooling. So it's unneeded sometimes to use Kubernetes. Most Kubernetes failure are business and organizational failures, not platform failures. Of course, Kubernetes would give you the goals you want if you if you know what you are using. So if you don't know what you're using, if you're just following trends, if you just want Kubernetes for the sake of Kubernetes and not understand what it actually can give you and what it cannot give you, there's no use of using Kubernetes. So, Kubernetes maturity from startup to enterprise. Level one is experimenting. Of course, if a company wants to start implementing Kubernetes, you would want to create a small POC or point proof of concept. This experimenting would be just having a small application or a small product in your team or in your company and just like manually playing with it using Kubernetes. But some organizations still on-premise KTS setup and do not want to adopt platforms due to costing. Yes, that's true, because if you're having a very very large scale applications, it's gonna cost you a lot. You're gonna pay via cluster. You're gonna pay more than just having the cluster. You're gonna pay also for the resources you're using. So you're gonna have to pay both ways. And sometimes just people have difficulty with changing. So sometimes actually Kubernetes can be a very good idea for them, or managed Kubernetes can be a very good idea for them, but they have very difficult time for changing. So experimenting, as we said, it's just providing a POC, testing how Kubernetes work, how the compartments connect with each other, how ingress handles load balancers, how services handles entry points. How deployments work, how pods work, how replica sets work. So this is level one in experimenting. Number two is standardizing. Of course, is if you're in the experimenting phase, you can use a pipeline like Bitbucket or Jenkins, or you can only like manually deploy it to an cluster. But if you want to actually start implementing Kubernetes, you would need to have a CI/CD pipeline. You need when you click build, you need this application to just be deployed on K8s. K8s meant to build some virtual isolation layer between the workloads and the infrastructure used. That is true, but still there are some implementation detail that might change across vendors. Example, storage class. Yes, that's true, but you need to dig deep in the understanding of cloud vendors, and if you're actually looking for something really specific. So some companies would just look for a Kubernetes cluster that would ease their operational overhead, and they just maybe do not care about the storage class or the type of EC2 or servers they're using, and they would just go to the maybe cloud vendor they were already using or the cloud vendor they have partnership with. And some companies would actually care in these small details based on also the app or business case that they have. So standardization is actually having some type of pipeline script, maybe YAML script or Groovy script that would automatically deploy any changes in the repository to these Kubernetes cluster. But they stuck on K8s mess up over solutions. Yes, it can happen. It can happen. So level three is actually optimizing your current infrastructure. So after you started experimenting, doing POCs, then you advance to standardizing, having pipelines, having multiple stages. You're gonna go to level three, which is optimizing, and then here you're gonna have a very good understanding about scaling and cost awareness. Here we're gonna have like a couple of month period of metrics. We're gonna understand the scaling decisions we're gonna do, and as you can see here, observability tied to business KPIs. Of course, you're going to have uptime, SLAs, all of these connected to the observability dashboard on Grafana, for example. And then you're going to have reduced downtime and failover or faster recovery. Sorry. So, business focus here is reliability and cost control after the first two steps. So, first step is you're going to have a POC. Second step, you're going to standardize. You're going to actually put some rules, put some pipelines, put some rules on how you can actually work on this Kubernetes cluster. And then after you standardize and everything is okay and everything's working, you're going to start to optimize your Kubernetes cluster into being more efficient, it can be better in resource utilization, better in cost, and in auto-scaling decisions. So, the fourth one is platform driven. Of course, this is after optimizing and after doing all of the things it needs. Here, you're gonna have platform driven, which is in regards of, do you have any kind of um, certification you have to adhere to, like SOC 2, GDPR, HIPAA, any kind of platform driven. When you're actually utilizing Kubernetes to its fullest potential, you're going to look into some of the policy governance and guardrails. You're going to see what kind of policies, how you can um, isolate it from attacks, and Kubernetes as a business capability. And you can see here, when we talk about self-service, you can actually understand, we're going to talk about it more later on in other sessions, that you can actually incorporate something called developer portal on it, like Backstage, one of CNCF products. Or you can incorporate Kubernetes with um, an area called DevX, or developer experience. That means developers can deploy to a Kubernetes cluster without the developer having this deep understanding of Kubernetes and without the interference of DevOps. And business focus here is skill, governance, and innovation, of course. So I have another question for you guys. And do you think companies are ever truly ready for Kubernetes? So do you think in any type of way businesses are actually ready to use Kubernetes? And I would say some companies that have very specialized team and a deep understanding and having uh, the very good culture on Kubernetes, yes, they're ready. But maybe no startups. I would guess yes, no startups are not ready to use Kubernetes, especially I don't think because they have the resources to hire a team that actually understand and has experience in Kubernetes. And yes, it depends on the team and adapting. Exactly. It depends on the team culture, not just engineering. As I said, it also depends on the business team. It depends on the managing decision makers. It depends on a lot of things. So it's a cultural thing. Okay. So we have real world business cases. What Kubernetes looks like in the wild. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so the first thing we have is e-commerce and digital products. So yes, you can use Kubernetes in an e-commerce application. You can separate the products, basically. Like, you can create a namespace for a cart, you can create a namespace for just browsing and selecting things, create another namespace, another part, or another service with paying or payments and payment gateways. So e-commerce can actually utilize Kubernetes for good things. Media streaming and content, of course, depending on the app architecture, some may not use Kubernetes. I would guess, like, I don't know if YouTube is a good example, or Netflix. Sometimes you need more streaming services like Kinesis or Apache services. So sometimes media and streaming content can, yeah, this is debatable, I would guess. Sometimes they can use Kubernetes for the core app, but not for the actual streaming services. I would guess that. Fintech and regulated industries, yes, this department can, or this organizations can actually utilize Kubernetes um, for regulation. Of course, when you become platform driven, like we said, you can utilize resources, you can utilize a lot of things. And startup and SaaS platforms, of course, startup are famous in using clusters, and SaaS platforms also use Kubernetes. So all of it actually depends on how much I talk, how much I explain about it. It all depends on the business case, to be honest. It all depends on the culture that you're having, and the type of resistance. Are you having any type of resistance from the team? Are you not having any resistance at all? So it all comes to multiple things. So is Kubernetes right for your organization? We have a couple of questions. So Kubernetes makes sense when you deploy frequently, and we said that in the beginning of the session. Downtime has real business impact. Teams need autonomy without chaos. And scaling is unpredictable, and you want platform standardization. And you have a very large scale application. These are the things that Kubernetes would actually make sense in a business. So you need to ask yourself these questions if you think your app actually needs Kubernetes. If not, you run one or two simple applications. Releases and patches are rare. Infrastructure is mostly static, so there's no major changes, no major deployments or releases, no clear ownership or platform in the team, and complexity overweighs the current needs, of course. So, uh, as we said, it's based on the culture, it's based on the business case. So, I think we have come to the end of this session, and we're going to talk about what's next and key takeaways. Starting with key takeaways, Kubernetes is actually a business enabler. It's not just a technical platform, as we said. Both teams can actually benefit from it. Cost, reliability, and speed depend on how you operate it, how you have a good understanding on accountability and ownership over the teams, the culture you're having inside of your company. There is no single right operating model for every company. Some companies would actually have both a managed service and uh, platform Kubernetes like Minikube, so they can use both. It's not just either you can have managed or you can have self managed, for example. Most failures are organizational, not technical. Yes. Maturity is a journey, it's not a one time decision. As I said, it goes into a span of a period of time. And let's see what the other slide have for us. So what's next? I highly recommend guys to join the special YAML for Kubernetes session. This is a special session. It's called YAML for Kubernetes. In this session, we're gonna actually go back to being technical, and we're gonna understand when next week. I do like weekly Sunday sessions. I'm gonna post about it on LinkedIn. Yes. So we're gonna talk a bit more on the YAML for Kubernetes session. So we've talked about Kubernetes in general. Then we went into the networking part, the observability part, and then the business part. So everything is tied to one thing, which is the YAML scripting that goes behind all of that. The YAML script, the script where you deploy, where you apply all of that, all of the things you need. So in the next session, we're gonna have a very good session about scripting. Thank you guys for joining. So I'm gonna stop the recording and answer a few questions I have in the chat.